Here are 10 paranormal experiments the government kept secret. Number 10 is Nazi occultism. Government research into psychic powers may have been started by the Nazis. After the war, the Allies tried to discover all that they could about Nazi research programs in case there was new technology to be found. This resulted in the discovery of Ahnenerbe, which was Heimlich Himmler's so-called science organization. The research and experiments carried out within its organization were horrific, and also included interest in occult and psychic phenomena. As well as instructing agents to gather up cult artifacts, it's believed that the Nazis experimented with telepathy and telekinesis. Though documentation of these experiments is sparse, it's rumored that both the West and the Soviets started their own similar programs. It began with a psychic arms race, which some suggest continues in secret laboratories to this day. Number 9 is Soviet biological communication. When the Soviet Union and the United States both started their investigations of the paranormal, they took two completely different approaches. The United States focused on the psychology of the paranormal, while the Soviets believed in the biological basis for psychic ability. One of those Soviet experiments involved testing whether telepathic communication could be used to communicate with remote regions, specifically with submarines. The thought process behind this was that without using conventional radio, such submarines would remain undetected, and it would also give the Soviet Union a way to communicate with its navy, even if radio infrastructure had been destroyed through a cataclysmic war with the US. While it's been proven that this was a real experiment, the findings of the program are currently unknown. Number 8 are the Kulana Trials. Nina Kulana was born in 1926 and was the subject of Soviet psychic experimentation throughout the Cold War. Her psychic abilities were allegedly so impressive that several experiments attempted to measure her seemingly natural talent for psychokinesis, the ability to move objects with the power of her mind. This research produced a number of black and white silent films which reportedly shows Nina's powers. The Soviet government employed 40 scientists, including 2 Nobel laureates, to study Kulana. And on March 10th of 1970, scientists investigated whether Kulana could influence biology itself. It was discovered that she could stop a frog's heart from beating during the session. It was hoped that Nina's powers could be harnessed somehow, allowing assassins to kill with their minds. However, to this day, nobody knows what happened to the files from that experiment, or ultimately what happened to Nina. Number 7 are the Uri Geller experiments. The CIA ran a number of experiments with Uri Geller, the self-proclaimed psychic from Israel. The extent of these experiments was revealed after the declassification of CIA documents in 2017. The experiments took place across 8 days in 1973 and were designed to test Geller's clairvoyant abilities. While James Randi, among others, claimed to have debunked Uri Geller as a fake, those involved with the experiments believed that Geller proved that he had psychic powers. One of the experiments involved scientists picking a word at random from a dictionary. One of the words chosen was fuse, and in response, in another room, Geller reportedly drew a firecracker. And most terrifyingly, he has claimed that he has also been asked to detonate a nuclear device through just the power of thought. Number 6 is Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book is perhaps the most famous study of unidentified flying objects ever carried out, and it was performed by the United States Air Force themselves. Beginning in 1952, the study lasted until 1970, and it has recently been revealed that the American government has continued investigating unidentified flying objects in the decades since. Project Blue Book collected and analyzed thousands of alleged unidentified flying object sightings. Those involved with the study were told to officially document that UFOs constituted no threat to national security. However, some researchers did admit that a small percentage remained unexplained. To this day, the findings of exactly what UFOs exist out there remain classified. Number 5 is naval premonition research. $3.85 million was invested in psychic research by the American Navy as recently as 2014. The Navy's approach, unlike many other government research programs into psychic ability, was not to try to understand the science behind the phenomena, but instead to employ it in a theater of war. The money was allocated after a number of supposed events during war in Iraq, which reportedly showcased the existence of psychic abilities. One such instance was a staff sergeant who detected an explosive device purely through intuition. The hope of this research is that this type of psychic intuition can be taught to personnel so that military units can maximize their ability to respond to dangerous events moments before they actually happen. However, there are others that believe that this sort of ability could easily be used for more nefarious purposes. Number 4 is the Philadelphia Experiment. The Philadelphia Experiment is a highly controversial military case, which allegedly took place in 1943. This experiment offered a frightening glimpse into the weird world of parallel dimensions. The first mention of this experiment was in 2 letters sent to Morris K. Jessup, an astronomer and UFO expert in 1955. Later, more anonymous information was produced, stating that the US Navy had developed a new unified field theory of physics and been able to teleport an entire ship across the country. This technology was deemed too dangerous when the ship was boarded, because it was found that the crew was horribly mutated and fused with the metal of the ship itself. Number 3 is Psychic Survey. Secret documents show that the UK government was involved in psychic research in the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The government hoped that it could use potential psychic insight to detect terrorist cells before they had the opportunity to strike. This study was performed under the guise of an academic survey. A questionnaire was sent out to self-proclaimed psychics, and the answers given were used to identify those with exceptional extrasensory talent. The next portion of the experiment involved psychics trying to identify a number of hidden images. The study concluded that some of the psychics were actually able to use some unknown means to see the images even when some distance away. What happened to this research and just how far it's gone remains classified today. Number 2 is Cosmonaut Communication. CIA documents show that throughout the 1950s and beyond, the Soviet government was interested in establishing a worldwide telecommunication system for its cosmonauts using psychic ability. It's been suggested that the cosmonauts training at that time learned to be in tune with each other and share information over vast distances. In the Soviet press, it was reported that psychic training had become an integral part of the space program. However, many of these experiments and psychic policies which the Soviet Union employed remained classified, and thus it's truly difficult to evaluate the success of each experiment. Some believe that the development of a psychic bond between cosmonauts or astronauts could be used to keep them sane when human beings are finally sent on long trips to colonize other planets. And number 1 is Project Stargate. The Stargate project was established in 1978 by the Defense Intelligence Agency in the United States. The primary goal of this project was to use a psychic phenomenon known as remote viewing. This allowed talented individuals to spy on remote locations purely through the power of thought. After the project was publicly terminated in 1995, rumors persisted that it was far from being discontinued, and that remote viewing research has become part of the American military's Black Ops budget. Debate rages about the success of the Stargate project to this day. Skeptics believe that the project was a waste of money and a failure, where supporters of this endeavor insist that the fact that the government invested so much time in testing psychic ability that proves once and for all that human beings have untapped potential within them. Number 1 is the Island of the Dolls. Located in a swamp in the middle of Aztec country, Mexico, this old abandoned island was once occupied by a single inhabitant named Don Julian Santana Barrera. The legend says that a small girl drowned near the island, after which dolls began floating in the water. Like a sane person, Barrera collected all of the dolls that appeared in the water over 50 years and scattered them all over the island. The dolls are still there today, making it a popular tourist attraction. But seriously, why would anybody go there, especially on vacation? I could go to Italy for some delicious food, Cuba for some warmth and sunshine, or the Island of the Dolls for everlasting nightmares. Okay. Number 2 is the Aokigahara Forest. At the base of Mount Fuji in Japan is a woodland known as Suicide Forest. In the last 50 years, more than 500 people have taken their lives here. Not only will you find nooses, bodies, and bones here, but you'll also find signs with messages like "Life is a precious thing, please reconsider," and "Think of your family." What's especially disturbing is it's become popular for scavengers to enter the forest in hopes of looting dead bodies. Really though, are you that hard up for cash? This is, just a thought, but how about instead of scouring Suicide Forest for freshly hung bodies to loot, that you go get a job and contribute something to society? Okay, thanks, Psycho! Number 3 is Lomé's Voodoo Market. In the city of Lomé in Togo, Western Africa, there exists one of the largest markets for voodoo paraphernalia in the world. Here you can find all of your voodoo needs, from talismans to fetishes to piles upon piles of animal skulls, including monkeys, vultures, crocodiles, cats, owls, and snakes. In Western African voodoo, they believe that animal remains can protect you from evil and disease. Me personally, I don't really believe in voodoo, and I would certainly never use it to benefit myself. Never. Number 4 is the Sedlik Ossuary. Located in the Czech Republic, this chapel contains the remains of 70,000 people arranged in bizarre artistic fashion that's visited by over 200,000 tourists every single year. Here you can find delightful pieces of furniture like bone chandeliers, garlands made of skulls, and lots of other stuff made of human remains. Kind of like a hellish IKEA. Welcome to hell. Would you like a meatball for 99 cents? Number 5 is the Stanley Hotel. Found high atop the Colorado Rocky Mountains, this creepy hotel was the inspiration for Stephen King's novel, The Shining. The entire place is said to be haunted, especially room 418. You do not go in there. Guests and staff have reported hearing children playing in the corridors late at night and piano music coming from the empty ballroom. Listen, I'm not afraid of many ghost stories, but I'm telling you, I would never go there. Literally all it would take is one kid to look at me and be like, and I would tip the f out the door. I wouldn't even bring my luggage. Number 6 is the Bran Castle. Located in Bran, Romania on the border of Transylvania, this famous landmark is also known as Dracula's Castle. The castle is known for its connections to Vlad the Impaler, who was the inspiration for the legend of Count Dracula. In the market just outside of the castle, you can find all kinds of creepy stuff like blood red wine, vampire masks, and even wooden stakes. Once you're inside the castle, you can find winding spiral staircases, low cavernous doorways, and of course, once bitten, eternal life. No, but seriously though, the place is a big bag of creepy. I would never go in there. Number 7 is the village of Jatinga. In northeastern India, the small village of Jatinga has a creepy secret. The birds there fall out of the sky and die for no apparent reason. But the really creepy part? It happens like clockwork every September or October between 7 and 10 p.m. and has done so for the last 100 years. And nobody knows what causes it, not even scientists. I really wouldn't want to visit, let alone live in a place where animals just spontaneously drop out of the sky. It's like you're just enjoying your day and all of a sudden, just
falling out of the sky. Damn.
Number 8 is Hashima Island. Located in Japan just 15 kilometers from Nagasaki, this island is an undisturbed ghost town. Once a forced labor camp during World War II, it became a coal mining facility that shut down, and all structures have remained there untouched for the last 30 years. The scenery looks like something out of an apocalyptic movie with abandoned buildings and wild foliage growing everywhere. Only 10% of the island is open to the public, and it's only accessible 160 days of the year due to harsh weather conditions.
Damn, why on earth would anybody want to visit this place?
Any one of these buildings is reason enough to stay the hell away from this place. Looks like Satan's toilet. Number 9 is the Winchester Mystery House. In San Jose, California, there's a massive 160-room mansion that's built like a haunted maze. It has mile-long hallways, countless hidden passages, dead ends, doors that open up to nothing, and staircases that lead to the ceiling. It was built upon for 38 years by the owner Sarah Winchester, who was told by a medium that she was haunted by the souls of the victims that were killed by her family's rifles, and the only way to make peace with them is to build a house and never stop building. Interestingly, the reason that she built the house like a maze was to confuse the ghosts that haunted her.
I'm no expert on the physics of ghosts or anything, but from the limited knowledge that I do have from watching Bugs Bunny cartoons, I'm pretty sure that they can walk through walls. You didn't really think this one through, did you, Sarah?
And finally, number 10, Pripyat. In northern Ukraine, this abandoned city once housed the workers and scientists of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Among the desolated buildings is an entire amusement park, which just adds to the supreme creepiness of this city. Despite being within the affected area of radiation from the Chernobyl meltdown in 1986, the area has since been reopened to the public since radiation levels have gone down significantly.
But seriously, would anybody choose to go there? I've seen The Hills Have Eyes. After that, I cannot recommend entering an empty city that's been affected by nuclear radiation. Unless, of course, you want to become dinner for some mutant that looks like the brother of Sloth from the Goonies. Hey, you guys!
Number 10 is Andrew Yuri. The most famous fictional mad scientist is Victor Frankenstein, who resurrected the dead. But there were many, both before and after Mary Shelley's novel, who not only believed that it was possible to raise the dead, but actually tried it. Andrew Yuri is just such one of those people. He was a Scottish scientist who took an interest in reanimating the dead. By 1818, Yuri gained access to the bodies of freshly hanged criminals. This allowed him to experiment in macabre and frightening ways. But these experiments were not carried out behind closed doors. Yuri was a showman and enjoyed cutting open the cadavers in front of an audience. Sending large amounts of electricity through the bodies, Yuri and his audience were captivated by the way that the bodies contorted and sneered as if they were alive. Number 9 is Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir Demikov was obsessed with firsts. He wanted to be the first surgeon to achieve something truly miraculous. After attending the University of Moscow in the 1930s, he began at the tender age of 21 to create technology which could be used to keep people alive. Some of it was astonishing, including a cardiac arrest device which could keep a person's heart beating for 5 hours during surgery. However, after these accomplishments, his work took a decidedly dark turn. He began to experiment with strange transplantation techniques. His most famous and most twisted experiment involved creating a two-headed dog by stitching a live dog's head onto the body of another live dog. He repeated this with many animals, which usually lived for several days in a confused and painful state. Number 8 is Michael Persinger. Michael Persinger carried out a number of cognitive neuroscience experiments in the 1990s and beyond, which have divided those who follow his work. Some believe that he's a visionary, however others an unhinged scientist spouting nonsense. But nonetheless, his greatest experiment, the God Helmet, still has people talking to this day. Persinger's helmet looks like an old motorbike helmet, but it messes with the mind of the wearer. Inside the helmet are powerful electrodes, which create an electromagnetic field which interferes with the brain. Some believe this allows the wearer to communicate directly with God or another higher power, and bring about spontaneous religious experiences. Others also believe that the helmet can bring people into communication with the dead, who still walk the earth unseen. Number 7 is Jose Delgado. Many scientists and experimenters have been obsessed with real-life mind control. Jose Delgado conducted a number of strange mind control experiments throughout the 1950s and 60s while a professor at Yale. Much of his experiments involved implanting electrodes into animal brains, using a remote control which sent radio commands. This allowed Delgado to control the movements of the animals. Most famously, Delgado implanted electrodes into the brain of a bull and got into the ring with it. When the bull charged, he pressed a button on his remote control, and suddenly the bull stopped charging at him. But most sinister of all, Delgado experimented on at least 25 people. Focusing on controlling aggression, he believed that he could one day create an army of zombies, which generals could control with the push of a button. Number 6 is Robert G. Heath. Like Delgado before him, Robert G. Heath explored the possibilities of mind control. While Delgado focused on domination, Heath explored the boundaries of pleasure and pain. At a university in New Orleans, Heath inserted electrodes into people's brains, wiring them up in such a way that he could control their experience of the world. With the flick of a switch, Heath was able to take individuals to the height of ecstasy and to the depths of pain and agony. By injecting a chemical called acetylcholine, Heath was able to ramp up each person's pleasure receptors to the point that they would be crippled by joy. However, he was also able to administer pain on an almost unprecedented scale. Many believe that Heath continued his work for the CIA, and that his mind control techniques have been expanded upon since. Number 5 is Giovani Alini. For many, Giovani Alini is a real-life Victor Frankenstein. His grotesque experiments on trying to raise the dead were clearly an influence on Mary Shelley's novel. In 1803, Aldini experimented on a man called Forrester, who had been hanged for drowning his wife and child. Aldini hoped to clear the name of his uncle, a man named Volta, who had supported the ideas decades previously that the dead could be animated with electricity. In front of medical students, Aldini placed electrodes on the head of Forrester and sent an electric charge through his body. Watching in horror, they observed Forrester open his eyes, grimace, and raise his clenched fists into the air. His body stopped moving when the electricity ceased. Some believe Aldini did indeed bring Forrester back from the dead for one last agonizing moment of existence. Number 4 is Ilia Ivanov. Soviet biologist Ilia Ivanov ran a series of disturbing experiments during the 1920s. His obsession was with human hybridization. This is the idea that you can cross a human being with an animal, creating a hybrid of the two. While working in Paris, Ivanov operated on a chimpanzee, grafting a human woman's ovary into the chimp. He then tried to fertilize the ovary with a human sperm. When his experiments failed, Ivanov traveled to Africa and experimented on 3 more chimpanzees, trying to artificially inseminate them with human DNA. Finally, when none of the chimpanzees fell pregnant, he found 5 female volunteers willing to mate with primates to see if hybridization was possible. As far as we know, he was never successful, but rumors persist that the hybrids are out there somewhere. Number 3 is Harry Harlo. Harry Harlo was an American psychologist who wanted to explore the idea of love. Love, after all, is the prime motivator for many people. It guides many of our actions and decisions and is one of the most positive emotions that a person can experience. But despite this positivity, Harlo's experiments were anything but. He experimented on rhesus monkey babies and their mothers. Many of his experiments involved torturing the baby monkeys to see how they would respond to their mothers afterwards, and whether their bond of love would continue. His most controversial experiment was called the Pit of Despair. He would place a baby monkey in an isolated chamber for up to a year without any contact with anyone or anything. Suffice to say, the monkeys became psychotic, but not as psychotic as Harry Harlo himself. Number 2 is Nikola Tesla. There is no doubt that Nikola Tesla is one of the greatest inventors of all time. However, he absolutely qualifies as a mad scientist when pursuing his more eccentric works. Famous for producing novel and innovative ways to harness electricity, Tesla also claimed to have worked on a particle gun which could shoot down thousands of airplanes at one time, an earthquake device which could collapse a building, and even the ability to teleport people across space. While these claims seem outlandish, many believe he's one of the only human beings in history who could actually develop such technologies. Rumors persist that in his experimentation with energy sources, he made contact with a mysterious extraterrestrial intelligence with a sinister purpose. And number 1 is Sergio Canavo. The realm of strange and sometimes frightening scientific experimentation is not just a relic of the past. As we speak, a group of scientists are trying to develop the first ever human head transplant. The idea is to remove the head from someone who's paralyzed and then place it onto the body of a recently deceased person with an intact spine. The work has been championed by a professor in Italy called Sergio Canavo. Many in the scientific community have argued that the work is highly dangerous, grisly, and risks the life of the participant. However, Canavo and his team are continuing to push through with their work, and claims have been made that a working procedure has been developed. Only time will tell whether Sergio Canavo is seen as a visionary scientist or a mad scientist for removing people's heads.
Number 1 is Aquagenic Urticaria. Aquagenic Urticaria, also known as the water disease, is an extremely rare disease that has only ever affected about 30 people. Those who have it are affected within minutes of being exposed to water. Everything from bathing to rain to their own tears can cause them to break into a severe rash or hives. In the most extreme cases, those affected are perpetually sick from their own body, as the majority of the body is made up of water. The most recent reported case of aquagenic urticaria was in 2009 when a 21-year-old woman from the UK was diagnosed with it. The only way for her to get her liquids is by drinking Diet Coke, and she can only be in the shower for a maximum of 10 seconds a week. Yeah, and you thought your allergies were bad. Number 2 is Kuru disease. Kuru is an incurable disease that has effects similar to that of mad cow. The disease has 2 notable effects. The first is that it makes millions of tiny holes in your brain that grow larger over time, causing the infected person to shake uncontrollably. The second, more bizarre effect is that it causes the person to burst pathologically into laughter, making it also known as the laughing sickness. Nobody can explain where the disease comes from, although it's believed that it could be caused by a protein created within our own bodies that simply goes bad. This is an especially bad disease to get because not only is it pretty scary, but random uncontrollable laughter sounds pretty awkward. Just awful. Number 3 is nodding disease. First discovered in Tanzania in the 1960s, this bizarre disease causes those afflicted with it to nod their head uncontrollably. It also stunts growth, making those affected with it appear much younger than they really are. It originally was never given much attention by doctors, however in recent years it's made a big re-emergence. Despite the reportedly large number of cases in countries like Sudan and Uganda, doctors remain clueless as to exactly what this is. It's believed that it could be an illness caused by a parasite, but that's really just a guess. The worst part about it is that the knotting is triggered by simple everyday events like eating, causing its victims to be malnourished, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Kinda makes it hard to eat soup when you're a living bobblehead, you know what I'm saying? Number 4 is sweating sickness. Sweating sickness is a particularly frightening disease because not only does nobody know what causes it, but death occurs within only a matter of hours of first seeing symptoms. The disease occurs in 2 specific stages. The first stage is the cold stage, accompanied by violent shivers, headache, pain in the limbs, and giddy laughter. The second stage is the hot stage, which is accompanied by delirium, rapid pulse, intense thirst, and of course, buckets and buckets of sweat. There have been 6 different outbreaks of this disease in the past that have killed so many people so quickly that there was no time to diagnose why it happens. I think it's interesting that almost all of the symptoms of this disease are identical to that of the common flu, so basically you wouldn't know you had sweating sickness until you, well, died. Or of course, unless you're a grown man and you start giggling like a little schoolgirl. That should tip you off. Number 5 is the Marburg virus. The Marburg virus is one of the nastier diseases on this list. Its clinical symptoms are indistinguishable from that of the Ebola virus and include disruption of the central nervous system, tissue necrosis, and seizures, among several others that are equally disturbing. The scariest thing about this disease is that not only does nobody know how it's transmitted, but it's not confined to any one part of the world. In fact, the most recent cases occurred in the Netherlands in Colorado. It's believed that the infection could be contracted through direct contact with an animal host, such as monkeys and bats. So basically, just don't go play with monkeys and bats and you should be fine. A little common sense, folks, it goes a long way. Number 6 is sleeping sickness. Also known as encephalitis lethargica, this illness causes those affected to be unable to move despite being fully conscious, giving them a strange half-asleep appearance. It begins innocently enough with a sore throat, but ends in hallucinations, insanity, and an emotionless state. Those who are lucky enough to survive this disease live the rest of their lives as unresponsive vegetables who sometimes break out in violent fits. Neither the origin of the sickness or what causes it are known, but it's believed to most likely be a virus of some kind. Number 7 is stiff person syndrome. SPS, or stiff person syndrome, is a rare neurologic disease that causes the body of a person affected to become progressively rigid as time goes on. Their muscles become increasingly constricted until eventually their body becomes so rigid that they're paralyzed. Unfortunately, it doesn't end there, as it has other effects as well, including problems swallowing, difficulty breathing, muscle ruptures, and even broken bones. Now, there is good news, which is that there are treatment options for those who contract this rare disease. The bad news is that doctors have absolutely no explanation as to why it develops or who will get it, condemning those who do get it to spend the rest of their lives doing their best hot dog impression. Number 8 is porphyria disease. Porphyria is affectionately known as the vampire disease, and for good reason. Those affected with it get receding gums, giving them the appearance of fangs. In addition to that, when they are exposed to light, their skin bubbles and they start pooping and peeing purple. Scientists speculate that this could be caused by a DNA mutation, but that's just a hypothesis. But luckily, despite not knowing what causes it, there is treatment available if caught early enough. So if one day you pop out a tiny grimace in the toilet, you should definitely go see your doctor right away. Although, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that. Number 9 is the Jumping Frenchman of Maine disorder. This disease was named after a group of 19th century French-Canadian lumberjacks who lived in Maine, who started to exhibit a strange disorder that caused them to be extremely jumpy and scream over the slightest provocation. Additionally, they also suffered from heightened suggestibility, meaning that they would act out any simple command that was yelled at them. So if you yelled, "do a cartwheel" at them, they would do a cartwheel. Interestingly, this disease only seemed to affect those French-Canadian lumberjacks, suggesting that the cause could be environmental, psychological, or genetic. Honestly, did the guy who named this disease really have to call it Jumping Frenchman of Maine disease? I mean, what does he have against French Canadians anyways? Did one of them spill poutine on him or something? Also, if you don't know what poutine is, you definitely need to Google it. You Americans are missing out. And finally, number 10, the dancing plague. The dancing plague, also known as dancing mania, is exactly what it sounds like, but it is definitely not as fun as it sounds. It's a mysterious disease that's affected thousands of people over the last several centuries that causes them to dance uncontrollably until they drop from exhaustion, or in many cases, until they drop dead. One of the most famous cases of dancing plague was in 1518 in France, when a woman named Frau Trophia danced for 6 days straight. Within a week, there were 34 others that joined her, and within a month, there were 400 people dancing uncontrollably in the streets of France, many of which just dropped dead. To this day, there's still no consensus among scholars as to what caused the illness. All that they know is that it was contagious. So next time you're like, I just want to dance, I just feel like I need to dance, that could be you talking, or it could be that some diseased Frenchman sneezed on you. Number 1 is Starfish Prime.
Starfish Prime was the code name for a high-altitude nuclear bomb test that the United States Military and Atomic Energy Commission conducted on July 9, 1962. During the experiment, a 1.4 megaton nuclear warhead was launched over the Pacific Ocean, reaching over 249 miles above sea level before it was detonated in space. The resulting explosion caused an unexpected massive electromagnetic pulse that hit the Hawaiian Islands, which was almost 900 miles away. The pulse damaged phone lines and knocked out over 300 streetlights across the state. But more importantly, the nuke damaged the Earth's magnetic field, which protects us all from solar winds and radiation waves. Radiation from the bomb itself settled and created a ring around the Earth that severely damaged and interfered with a number of satellites floating around it for the next 5 years. If it had destroyed or severely altered the magnetic field any further, it could have caused countless deaths from the harmful radiation of space. Number 2 are tectonic weapons. While the United States were trying to blow a big hole in the sky, a bunch of Russian military scientists were hard at work, focusing their nuclear exploding capabilities a little closer to home, or rather, right under home. They began testing underground with their new inventions called tectonic weapons. These bombs were supposedly tested in several programs between 1987 and 1992, codenamed Mercury and Volcano. The aim of these tests were to manipulate the electromagnetism of the Earth's tectonic plates. Theoretically, this meant that they could cause earthquakes at will, a truly devastating weapon if perfected. In other words, the enemy would not have even known that they were attacked. Essentially, it would have looked just like a natural disaster. It doesn't need to be explained why exploding nukes underground would be bad for everyone, considering the release of radiation as well as the impact of messing with the tectonic plates that we all live on top of. However, luckily, according to Russia, the idea was cancelled, although there are whispers that it was only postponed. Number 3 is the Kola Super Deep Borehole. The Kola Super Deep Borehole was the brainchild of Soviet scientists who wanted to drill as far down into the Earth's crust as they possibly could. The project began in the Kola district of the Soviet Union on May 24, 1970, and halted in 1992 due to an inability to drill deeper through the ground temperatures of up to 356 degrees Fahrenheit. Though the hole was only 9 inches wide and reached 7.5 miles into the ground, some researchers thought it may have had a major impact on the tectonic plates around it. Hypothetically, burrowing so deep into the crust could cause a release of pressure that built up under miles of solid rock. This pressure had the potential to cause a shift in the tectonic plates, causing a massive earthquake or even worse, mass volcanic eruptions. Number 4 are bubonic plague weapons. The bubonic plague, or Black Plague, has literally plagued the Earth for centuries, killing millions upon millions of people. During the Cold War, Russia was placed in a pretty damaging situation when their top secret project to utilize the plague as a means of attack was brought to light. One of their top biologists, Vladimir Demikov, defected to the United Kingdom in 1989 and brought the secrets of the Soviet biological warfare research programs with him. Not only were the Russians using the plague, they made it resistant to antibiotics and developed a warhead for it to be launched into enemy territory. If this biological weaponry had ever been actually used, it could have wiped out more than half the population of the Earth, just like it did back in the 14th century. Number 5 is the Trinity nuclear test. Trinity was the codename for the very first nuclear bomb test explosion that occurred on July 16, 1945, in the Jornada del Muerto desert just outside of Socorro, New Mexico. Since a nuclear bomb had never been tested before, there were many theories as just to what would happen. Two scientists who worked on the bomb, Enrico Fermi and Edward Teller, theorized that the bomb's explosion would cause an explosive reaction within the nitrogen in the Earth's atmosphere. This reaction would literally set the air on fire and could destroy pretty much everything on the planet. In a move that was actually a precursor to switching on the Hadron Collider, in order to find out if they were correct or not, they simply just detonated the bomb. They literally experimented using a pass or fail result to determine if it would have destroyed all life on Earth. Lucky for us, this did not happen. Number 6 is Project SEAL. It turns out even the Kiwis have contributed to the creation of weapons of mass destruction. While the United States of America was busy creating the atomic bomb during World War II, New Zealand was working on their own devastating weapon that could have let them harness the power of water. Project SEAL was the code name for the small country's experiments into weaponizing the ocean itself. Backed by the US, the goal was to use high-yield explosives underwater to create giant tsunamis capable of destroying ships and submarines and basically obliterating any coastal towns and bases of the target country. Between 1944 and 1945, New Zealand detonated around 3,700 bombs underwater in tests to create a tsunami. The bomb tests were unsuccessful in pushing the explosive force in a horizontal manner and failed to create any actual tsunamis. However, had New Zealand succeeded in these experiments, it would have revolutionized weapons of mass destruction. Number 7 is oil-eating bacteria. Oil spills are devastating to the environment, affecting not only sea life, but in a way, all life on this planet. Entire ecosystems have fallen to toxic oil being introduced into them. But what happens when the solution to the problem winds up doing nearly just as much damage? In 1971, American microbiologist Professor Ananda Mohan Chakrabarty genetically engineered a form of bacteria that could consume oil faster than any other bacteria before it. This scientific breakthrough was patented and hailed as a new and efficient method of cleaning up oil spills. However, concerns were raised about just how powerful and efficient this new superbacteria was. The oil-eating species it was engineered from would tend to compete with each other rather than constantly consuming the oil, which led to less efficiency. The new superbacteria had the best traits of all these bacteria, and it came to light that it would outcompete any other bacteria that it came into contact with. Like evil little nanomachines, its introduction could have brought about the collapse of entire ecosystems, which in turn could drastically alter life as we know it and even end the lives of many species, potentially even humans. Number 8 is the Large Hadron Collider. The Large Hadron Collider, an underground 17-mile-long particle accelerator located between France and Switzerland, was used in 2012 to discover the Higgs boson particle. The Higgs boson, or the God particle, is an elusive particle that gives objects their mass. In order to find it, scientists used the LHC to accelerate particles and crash them together at the speed of light. In doing so, they created a tiny but extremely powerful surge of energy, which some believe could spawn some super dark alternate discoveries. Theories in this category include accidentally creating a black hole that devours the entire planet, or the creation of a strange matter particle that could almost instantly convert the entire mass of the Earth into a hot ball of death. Though an executive committee decided that the risk was minimal due to similar events happening naturally in the universe, there was no way of being certain of the experiment's safety. Number 9 is weaponized fungus. Rice crops are a critical food supply when you consider that they feed not only armies, but hundreds of millions of citizens worldwide every day. A certain fungus called Magna porthgricia infects and kills rice crops, causing some pretty dire issues in the countries that depend on them the most. The fungus spreads itself by releasing thousands of tiny spores from infected plants and has devastated rice crops in 85 countries, including the United States. America has in the past toyed with a spray-on version of the fungus in preparation for any scenario in which they would possibly want to starve their enemies. And not only that, but the fungus affects essential crops like wheat, barley, and rye. So ultimately, they would have probably starved everyone that depends on bread. Let's be thankful that they never used it. And number 10 is the quantum Xeno effect. This next experiment is actually still ongoing, which is pretty scary and can be pretty tricky to understand since it involves quantum mechanics. If you've ever heard the expression "a watched pot never boils," that pretty much essentially sums up the Xeno effect, or the Turing paradox as it's called. Continuously observing or measuring particles causes them to never change, like they're in a never-ending loop as long as you're looking at them. One theory by Professor Lawrence Krauss states that observing dark matter in space actually causes it to decay faster. Dark matter is what makes up 84.5% of the entire universe, and scientists have been extremely curious about it ever since the 1990s. Apparently, if we observe it long enough, it can actually become unstable and collapse, causing a chain reaction that would bring about the end of the universe. Number 1 are the Digestion Experiments. In 1822, a man in Michigan named Alexis St. Martin received a gunshot wound to his abdomen. Amazingly, the man survived. However, the bullet hole in his stomach never healed properly. A doctor named William Beaumont realized the strange value behind the man's wound and decided to conduct a gruesome experiment to better understand the human digestion process. He tied a piece of string to some food and inserted it into the man's stomach through the hole, causing tremendous pain to St. Martin. Beaumont would even occasionally pull the food out every few hours to inspect it as it was digested. However, as disturbing as this sounds, the experiment actually provided a window of knowledge to doctors who previously knew very little about the human digestion process. Kind of makes you think about the amount of trust that we give to doctors, doesn't it? Remember that next time you're under anesthesia. Number 2 is the mustard gas experiments. Mustard gas, developed during World War I, is a chemical weapon that creates large and painful blisters to the skin and lungs. The effects are often far worse than that and often lead to death when inhaled. In 1943, the US military decided to experiment using the gas on a group of 18-year-old boys fresh out of boot camp by testing the gas on their equipment. Nearly all of the test subjects received severe injuries from the experiments, including severe permanent scarring of the lungs and painful blisters and burns to their entire body. Number 3 are the Agent Orange experiments. During 1965 and 1966, dermatologist Dr. Albert Kligman began a series of disturbing experiments on the inmates of Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia. One of these experiments included secretly testing the effects of Agent Orange, a chemical weapon used to destroy crops and vegetation on a group of inmates. Kligman injected a toxin from Agent Orange at a dosage of 468 times that of the normal exposure into prisoners, causing them to convulse and develop horrible and painful acne in sensitive areas of their bodies like their armpits, groin, and face. But what may be most disturbing is that upon entering the prison for the first time and seeing what would be his future subjects, Kligman was quoted as saying, "All I saw before me were acres of skin." Goes to show you that monsters aren't always just in bad dreams. Number 4 are the Tuskegee Experiments. What happened in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1932 is a conspiracy theorist's dream. Over the course of 40 years, government-funded doctors conducted a barbaric experiment on African American male patients. Some patients, like those that were infected with syphilis, a painful sexually transmitted disease, were flat out denied treatment even after penicillin was invented to study the effects of the virus. But in an even more twisted experiment, some subjects were given fake placebo treatments, causing all but 74 of them to die painfully from a disease that was treatable. In the end, 28 patients died directly from syphilis, 100 died from complications related to it, and 40 of the patients' wives were actually infected infected with syphilis, along with 19 children who were born with congenital syphilis. Number 5 is the chamber experiment. Around 1965, during the Cold War, the Soviets conducted numerous horrendous experiments on their prisoners. They developed a deadly poisonous gas that was tasteless and odorless. In order to test its effectiveness, they created a laboratory known as the chamber. It was there that they would test the gas on living and unwilling prisoners. However, the experiment did not end there. The prisoners were also fed a mixture of mustard gas, ricin, digitoxin, among others. The experiments led to the Soviets developing a poison called C2, which reportedly was so potent that it would actually physically change the victim, disfiguring them and causing death within only 15 minutes. Number 6 is the Aversion Project. In 1971, Dr. Aubrey Levin led a scientific project in South Africa during their racial segregation. The focus of the project was to try and cure homosexuality in members of the South African military. The subjects of these experiments, who were usually drafted into the service against their will, would be sent off to a military hospital known as Ward 22. Men between the ages of 16 and 24 were forced into electric shock treatments, chemical castrations, and even gender reassignment surgeries. In total, around 900 people were subjected to Levin's twisted sexual reorientation experiment. But in what may be the most disturbing twist of all is that up until 2010, he was still teaching medicine at a university here in Canada. Number 7 is Project 4.1. Project 4.1 was the name given to an experimental medical study conducted by the United States of America of the residents of the Marshall Islands exposed to the radioactive fallout from the March 1st, 1954 Castle Bravo nuclear test in Bikini Atoll. They wanted to determine the extent of the effects of significant beta and gamma radiation in living humans. They discovered that almost all of the women exposed to the devastating radiation had stillbirths and malformities in their babies. Unfortunately, some may argue that those who did die were in fact the lucky ones, as the children and subjects who did survive all got aggressive cancer and painful malformities that they had to suffer with until their untimely deaths. Number 8 is the electrified corpse experiment. Back in 1708, Luigi Galvani, a professor of anatomy in Italy, was experimenting on a dead frog when he found that electricity caused involuntary muscle movements within the animal's body. News of the discovery spread, and by the 1800s, Luigi's nephew Giovanni had taken the experiment on the road as a gruesome spectacle. Only, instead of using a dead frog, his curiosity moved him into testing it on deceased humans. Giovanni would connect the wires of a 120-volt battery to different body parts of a corpse and then observe its violent spastic reactions to the electrical currents. Of course, all of this was in front of an audience of horrified people who believed that the body was actually coming back to life. Number 9 is the Stamford prison experiment. In August of 1971, Stanford University professor Philip Zimbardo conducted an experiment involving students in a simulated prison. Zimbardo wanted to study the effects of putting good-natured people into an evil environment by creating 2 equal groups, one of guards and one of prisoners. The power structure between the guards and inmates was a powerful negative force that ended up corrupting the guards, causing many of them to develop genuine sadistic tendencies. This led to extremely dangerous and mentally damaging events, while the inmates became increasingly rageful and degraded. Zimbardo had to shut down the experiment prematurely after only 6 days, when he realized that it was having an astoundingly toxic effect on their behaviors as well as his own. And number 10 is the monster study. In perhaps what is the most sadistic experiment occurred in 1939. Speech pathologist Wendell Johnson from the University of Iowa and his grad student Mary Tudor experimented on 22 normal-speaking orphaned children. The children were split into 2 groups and given speech therapy for stuttering. The first group of children were treated well and were even encouraged and rewarded for their speech skills. However, the second group of orphans were criticized and ridiculed for even the smallest errors in their speech. speech. The children from the first group received no negative effects from their therapy. However, the kids from the second group developed psychological problems and speech issues that followed them into adulthood that they were forced to live with for the rest of their miserable lives. They literally created monsters. Number 1 is the Great Pyramid of Giza. On November 26, 1922, after 7 years of searching, archaeologist Howard Carter finally discovered the tomb of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun and all the treasures that came with it. Many people feared for the man's life, as it was said that there was a famous curse on the tomb that claimed death shall come on swift wings to him that toucheth the tomb of the pharaoh. Though it's been said that Carter avoided the ancient curse and died peacefully in 1939, many have claimed to have seen him wandering the pyramid of Giza, as if his soul is not being allowed to rest. Additionally, floating orbs have been seen, whispering and footsteps have been heard, and even 2 young children were seen running about the crypts only to vanish. Number 2 is Edinburgh Castle. Scotland is no stranger to ghost stories, having a number of castles with almost every one of them said to be haunted. But by far the most famous of them overlooks what is said to be the most haunted city in all of Europe, Edinburgh. Throughout history, Edinburgh Castle has been the site of considerable death and bloodshed, creating the perfect site for paranormal activity. Hundreds upon hundreds of tourists and staff at the castle have reported feeling being pulled at, shoved, pinched, or otherwise touched by something that they couldn't see. The sounds of whispering, screaming, laughing, and the bang of a drum have all been heard, and many have seen the legendary headless drummer boy himself. Other visible apparitions include a decrepit old man, an angry woman, battered prisoners, and a ghostly dog that wanders the cemetery on the grounds. One chilling tale tells of a piper who wandered the tunnels under the castle hundreds of years ago. He played his bagpipes as he marched, so people could track his progress, but suddenly he stopped playing. He was never found, but it was said on a dark night you can still hear him playing. Number 3 is Corvina Castle. Located in Romania, Corvina Castle is known to the locals as Hunyad Castle, but you may better know it as Dracula's Castle. Built between 1307 and 1315 by Charles I, Corvina is widely considered to be one of the most haunted castles in the world, and with a dark history like this place has, it's no wonder that it has the reputation that it does. Corvina Castle's interior fountain was said to have been constructed by Turkish prisoners who were promised freedom upon completion but never got it. It's said that their angry spirits still wander the halls. A dungeon under the castle's Hall of Knights was even home to Vlad the Impaler for 7 years, from 1462 until 1469, as King Corvin had him imprisoned there. It's said that this is where the blood-crazed ruler truly lost his mind, and became the legendary ruthless inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Visitors have claimed to have heard screaming of slaves, seeing silhouettes of figures in pictures taken there, and some have even claimed that angry spirits have left marks on them, torturing them as they spent the night there. Number 4 is Bangar Fort. Built by King Sawe Madho Singh in the early 1600s, Bangar Fort is surrounded by ruins and the decaying husks of several temples that have withered so much it's hard to pinpoint just how many there actually were 400 years ago. To put it simply, it looks just like the kind of place people could easily go missing. Though the fort is a world-famous landmark, the local Indian people refuse to live anywhere near it. In fact, young locals call it Bhoot Bangla, or the Fort of Ghosts. At night, multiple ghosts have been sighted walking about the structure, so much so that locals were forced to have the entire fort locked up. It's even said that several people who have foolishly spent the night there have been found dead the next morning, making Bangar Fort not only an Indian landmark, but also the most haunted place in all of India. Number 5 is Chateau de Chateaubriand. Located in France, Chateau de Chateaubriand was first constructed in the 11th century, and since then has seen a great deal of murder, war, and mystery. Part of that mystery involves the ghosts who tend to appear, some of them on a routine schedule. On October 16, 1537, Françoise de Foix died in her room inside Chateaubriand. A mistress of King Francis I of France, she was killed by her husband, Jean de Laval, who couldn't handle his knowledge of the affair. Since then, on October 16th of every year, the ghost of Francois can be seen wandering around the castle. It's been said that a bloodstain often appears on the floor of her room where she died, and if you're there at the stroke of midnight on that anniversary, you can watch a procession of ghosts, knights, monks, and Francois herself that make their way up their staircase. Number 6 is Castle of Good Hope. Castle of Good Hope was built in South Africa in 1674 and stands today as the oldest and largest of the country's colonial buildings. A big draw for tourists, the fortress houses quite a few specters, including a tall, glowing man who's been seen standing atop the fort's high walls, staring down at the town below. If you're truly lucky, you might even see him leap off the wall to his apparent death. In the 1700s, a soldier hanged himself in the bell tower, and the room was sealed off, and to this day, people claim to hear one of the bells ringing from time to time. It's also said that you can hear the hanging man's footsteps as he makes his way to the spot where he took his own life. Other ghosts include a crying woman in gray, a beautiful young lady, and a black ghostly hound that pounces on people, even knocking them to the ground before disappearing. Number 7 is the Forbidden City. There's a lot of reasons this city has the name that it does. Located in Beijing, China, the Forbidden City, or the Purple City as it's known there, was the imperial palace for the Ming Dynasty. Built between 1406 and 1420, the palace was only accessible by the upper class, with anyone deemed unworthy not even allowed to hear the stories that it exists. The Forbidden City had over 600 years of assassinations, plotting, and cold-blooded murder in its history. That said, there's no wonder why the building is known as one of the most haunted places in not only China, but the entire world. The most famous ghost there is the Weeping Woman, who has been seen in white garments crying in various parts of the complex. Guards and passers-by have reported hearing someone play a flute, even though there's no discernible source. Other ghosts, including royalty, guards, and even some concubines who were murdered there, have also been seen. Number 8 is Mount Everest. Mount Everest is known for its incredibly difficult challenge of reaching the top, but what's lesser known is the sheer amount of death that's happened there. Which makes sense. Those who climb this mountain have to face a climb that surpasses 29,000 feet above sea level, so death is very much a risk. A number of people who've attempted to climb Everest have reported seeing ghosts of those who died on the mountain at various points in their journey from base camp to peak. Over 220 human beings have lost their lives trying to reach the top, with some of them radioing down, claiming to see people in old climbing gear standing in front of them before the radio goes permanently silent. Some of the ghosts seem to encourage climbers to make it, while others, seemingly jealous of them, go about trying to scare them right off the rock. Number 9 is the Tower of London. Easily one of the most haunted places in the United Kingdom, the Tower of London has multiple spirits in it, almost all of them malevolent. Built by William the Conqueror on the north bank of the River Thames in 1078, the tower is officially known as Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress, and is home to the ghosts of Anne Boleyn, Lady Jane Grey, and Thomas A. Becket, as well as many others. Beheaded on May 19, 1536, Queen Anne Boleyn is said to be the most widely seen and persistent of the building's paranormal inhabitants. Witnesses claim she walks about the castle, a headless apparition, while others have seen her wandering around the site of her execution. The ghosts of 2 separate children, former princes, have also been seen, walking as they hold hands with looks of sheer horror on their faces, silently whispering, "Come play with us." And number 10 is the White House. Quite possibly the world's most famous house, the White House is not just a place that the President of the United States and their family calls home, but it's also home to a number of apparitions. It's been reported by multiple people, including Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Presidents Roosevelt, Hoover, and Eisenhower, that Abraham Lincoln himself has appeared in the building, standing by a fireplace, pacing the upper hallways, or, in one occurrence, knocking on bedroom doors at night. He's considered the most frequently cited ghost in the White House, with many suggesting that since he was assassinated, he left a lot of work unfinished. The ghosts of Presidents Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, and John Tyler have been encountered, as well as a number of other individuals, including ex-first ladies, employees, and even British soldiers. People have heard voices, felt cold spots, and seen full-bodied apparitions appear before them, making the White House a paranormal anomaly.
Number 1 is White's Gentlemen's Club. Located in London, England, is the most exclusive gentlemen's club in London and possibly the most exclusive in the world. The club's members include only the richest and most powerful of society's elite, including Prince William, Prince Charles, Conrad Black, and even former prime ministers. Originally built in 1674, it's an all-boys club only accepting men. It has 3 stories, including a basement and an attic, and several rooms within. These rooms are often used to hold private and secretive events that the public is never privy to, and members often use these rooms to engage in other activities such as high-stakes betting. In order to even get close to the club, let alone join its ranks, you need to know someone that's already a member. Or you could just master their secret password, which is probably just, "Meh, I bathe in money, meh." Make sure you twist the evil villain mustache or you're not getting in. Number 2 is Area 51. Located in the state of Nevada, the infamous Area 51 is by far one of the most well-known and least accessible places on Earth. According to the CIA, the official names for the facility are Homey Airport or Groom Lake. To this day, the base's primary purpose is still publicly unknown, as the government has never disclosed it. The public has never been allowed inside, which has led to tons of wild speculation. Non-conspiracy theorists generally believe that the base is used to develop and test new aircrafts and weapon systems. However, conspiracy theorists generally believe that that's simply a front, and that Area 51 is actually a hub of intergalactic activity where testing of and communication with extraterrestrial life is commonplace. All of this intense secrecy and theorizing has made its way into pop culture through shows like The X-Files and Roswell, as well as several movies. Of course, all of these tinfoil hat freaks need to chill, because aliens don't exist and you should simply stop asking questions.
This message sponsored by the CIA.
Number 3 is the Jiangsu National Security Education Museum. Located in Nanjing, China, is a very special museum that has some extremely restrictive rules as to who can enter. Displayed here is a range of documents and gadgets dating all the way back from 1927 that have been deemed too sensitive for anyone that is not Chinese, thus foreigners are forbidden from entering. Those who were born in China are severely restricted once inside. No photography is allowed in this museum, which is said to hold spy gear such as guns disguised as lipstick, hollowed out coins that hide documents, and decks of cards that hide maps. Unfortunately, very little else is known about the contents of this building due to China's policy that the museum is for Chinese citizens only. Which is odd, because the Chinese travel, right? So somebody knows something. Somebody spill the beans, we gots to know! Number 4 is the Metro 2. Located in Moscow, Russia is the Metro 2, an informal name given to the purported secret underground metro system. It was supposedly built and codenamed D6 during the reign of Joseph Stalin. The length of the Metro 2 is rumored to exceed that of the public metro, have 4 lines, and lie 200 meters underground. It's believed to be operated by the Ministry of Defense and connects the Kremlin to the Federal Security Service, as well as several other important branches of government. Several reports exist as to the discovery of this transit line by urban exploration groups. This has also reportedly been confirmed by documents obtained by United States military intelligence, however it has never 100% been proven to exist. Of course, the Metro 2 was just one of the many names they considered, including the Rush-In train and the No Stalin. Thank you, I'll be here all week. Number 5 is Room 39. Located in North Korea, as oh so many shady things are, Room 39 is a secretive organization that maintains the foreign currency slush fund for the country's leader. They hold as much as $5 billion in funds and have been suspected to be involved in illegal activities such as counterfeiting money, illicit weapon sales, and drug production. It's believed to be located inside the ruling Workers' Party building in Pyongyang, not far from Kim Jong-un's villa. However, it's believed that this organization is critical to Kim Jong-un's continued power, enabling him to buy political support and fund North Korea's nuclear program. Despite overwhelming concern about Room 39 from the international community, North Koreans remain unconcerned because as soon as Kim Jong-un flashes that adorable smile, everyone just melts. Or else. Number 6 is the Coca-Cola Recipe Vault. The World of Coca-Cola interactive exhibit in Atlanta, Georgia is a destination frequented by tourists, however not everything there can be seen by the public. Within the exhibit is a dedicated vault that holds a secret held since 1886, the coveted secret recipe for Coca-Cola. After Dr. John S. Pemberton invented Coca-Cola in 1886, the formula has been kept a close secret. It was only ever shared with a small group of people and never written down. That is, until it was eventually put to paper and kept at SunTrust Bank since 1925 until it was moved to this new location in 2010. To this day, the full formula is only known by approximately 3 people, unlike Pepsi's formula, which is probably in the hands of some warehouse manager somewhere named Craig. Craig's a good dude. Number 7 are Google's data centers. Unlike the rest of the places on this list, Google data centers exist all over the world and can only be accessed by a select few and certainly not the public. These massive centers are loaded with hundreds of thousands of servers, colorful cables, and bicycles so that engineers can get around quickly. Each of these locations represents a hub of information where Google processes internet search requests, stores YouTube clips like this one, and distributes emails for millions of its users. They are highly secure locations that store unbelievable amounts of user information. The high security is necessary as such large amounts of information, if fallen into the wrong hands, could have catastrophic consequences for millions of people in an increasingly digital world. Yet, aside from hackers, the real threat to the data center remains a carelessly thrown magnet that threatens to wipe away all those beautiful cat videos on YouTube that we've come to love. Practice magnet safety, my friends. Number 8 is the Chapel of the Ark of the Covenant. Found in Ethiopia is a chapel that's believed by some to be the final resting place of the Ark of the Covenant that holds the 10 Commandments. The legendary Ark is protected by a single high priest who is charged with its care and preservation. Interestingly, he's the only one who's allowed to actually look at the Ark and is the only one who knows how to locate it within the chapel. He's never allowed to leave the chapel and will name a successor on his deathbed. No one from the public has ever seen the artifact, and no one is allowed to enter the church to view it. Because of the amount of secrecy around it, many question the legitimacy of the Ark actually residing at the chapel, despite all major news sources reporting on it, including CNN. But hey, some guy from Ethiopia said it's there, and if some guy says it, it has to be true. Obviously. Number 9 is the Givari Reserve. Located in Brazil is the Givari Reserve, the largest concentration of uncontacted tribes in the world. According to satellite imagery, at least 8 tribes exist, with as many as 14 potentially existing. The reserve itself is a swath of Amazon jungle half the size of Florida. Both the Brazilian and Peruvian governments strictly regulate who may visit the reservation, with very few being allowed. But even if somehow you did manage to visit them, they would be threatened by the foreign germs that you carry. You know, when I think of this tribe, I really can't help but think of the Bumblebee tuna scene from Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. The difference is that you would pose a serious threat to them and they would probably kill you, so not as funny. And number 10, the Bank of England Vaults. Located in London, England is the central bank for the United Kingdom, the model from which most modern banks have been based upon. However, beneath the city is the vault, a massive space greater than that of the 3rd tallest building in the city, Tower 42. There are several security measures that make sure that the vault is extremely hard to get into, including keys that open it that are 91 centimeters long. Making it even more difficult to enter is that even if you wanted the keys, you wouldn't know from whom to take them from because the employees of the vault are kept anonymous. The near impossibility of entering this vault is a necessity, as a near 156 trillion pounds worth of gold deposits exist there. So unless you're a psychic or can carry around a few 91 centimeter keys without being noticed, you're not getting in there. Sorry.